Today, inshallah, we are joined with our Imam Hossam Ed-Deen Allam. For all of our dear viewers, Imam Hossam, he is the head of education in Musamitu Institution. He is also a member of Al-Azhar Fatwa Global Center, and he is actually a lecturer at Faculty of Sharia and Law, Al-Azhar University. And today, inshallah, the thing we're going to do is that we're going to have a quick recap on the things we mentioned in the last two webinars, as this is actually the third webinar in this topic. Also, we're going to talk about common misconceptions regarding suicide. Also, we're going to have this point, which is suicide warning signs. I believe that we mentioned some of them, but we still have more and more. Also, we're going to talk about practical suicide prevention advice. Know somebody who's about to commit suicide. How can I prevent them from doing this one, or how can I stop him? So, Imam Hussein, please.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Muhammad. Well, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise due to Allah the Almighty, the Lord of the worlds. May Allah's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon His final and last messenger, Muhammad. And may Allah's peace, mercy, and blessings be with you, Sheikh Muhammad, and all our dear respected viewers across the globe. Definitely, it's a very important topic, and this is why I do think that it is really worthwhile to dedicate this third webinar on suicide prevention. Uh, Before even uh, giving a quick overview, or if you like, a fast panorama of what we have already discussed over the past couple of webinars, I'd like to stress a very important point, and that's the fact that, and this is, as I said, and as I mentioned in the previous time, the good news is that in spite of all of these alarming statistics about suicide and suicidal people, the good news is it is preventable. Suicide is preventable, and this is why it is very important for all community members to be helpers and to acquire and to attain this very essential knowledge and tools, so that really we can make a difference in people's life. Because here, with the spread of this awareness, we actually and literally can save people's lives. So if each and everyone does their best, they can at least save a human life, and this is definitely such a remarkable good deed from the Islamic perspective. With that being said, I'd like to uh, pinpoint a very important issue that we highlighted in the previous webinar, and that's the point that we need to be aware of what it means to commit suicide. That this person is not necessarily a crazy person, rather, this is a cry out for help. We are here in front of a human being who is so desperate that they cannot see any way out other than ending their lives. This is why we need to be always there and equipped with the right knowledge and the effective approaches to protect people's life, and especially the people that and the individuals that we care about. This is why also I'd like to stress a very important point here, that all what we are sharing here, these are just very basic and principal pieces of information, data, and approaches and advice. But still, each and every one of us need to do their part by digging deeper and acquiring more knowledge. And this is why it's very important to have professional and qualified mental health specialists that people can resort to, and people can find help in returning to them. With that being said, Sheikh Muhammad, I'd like to highlight some what I would say common misconceptions about suicide. So, what I will mention now are just misconceptions that we need to be aware of in order to avoid falling into these misconceptions. A very common misconception here in this regard is that people who talk about suicide will not really do it. This is not true, because we understand that when people mention something that's related to suicide, it can be a sign that's reflective of what is going through their minds. At the other end, there are people who would say, if someone is thinking about committing suicide, then what is the point of trying to prevent them, because they will do it anyway? And this is another common misconception. As a matter of fact, when we directly ask, and this is what we need to do, we need to directly ask the person, are you thinking of committing suicide or killing yourself? Some people think that this would even plant the idea in their minds, but as a matter of fact, this is not the case, or this is not how it works, because most often people who are suicidal or are experiencing suicidal thoughts, they need to open up. They need to find someone that they can find refuge in. And once these signs or these flags are shown, we need to take action by providing help and by seeking professional help. And this is very important. Another very important point in this regard is to make sure that we eliminate and we take away from their surroundings any tools or any form of substance that can be used in committing suicide. This makes a big difference, and we have, as a matter of fact, an academic literature that supports this point. That's just by preventing suicidal individuals of having access to means or tools or uh, substances that can be used in committing suicide, just by removing this and taking this away from their reach, is very effective in bringing down the probability of committing suicide. So this was a very important point. Another common misconception is that anyone who seeks or attempts to take their own lives, they must be crazy or lunatics. And this is another, I would say, even myth, because it does not necessarily mean that this person is mentally ill. Rather, they can just be depressed. They can be frustrated. And we have also academic literature that points out that committing suicide can be impulsive. So it is not necessarily that it is something that has to be premeditated for so long. This is why it is always very important to keep a watchful eye on any signs that would appear on our children. For instance, if they are sleeping more than usual, or they are on the opposite, not sleeping enough. If they are talking about this in a very alarming way, if, for instance, they uh, are rejecting abnormally their friends, or they are acting unlike how they usually act or how they usually react, or if they are writing goodbye letters, or if they are calling family members and friends and saying goodbye to them. These are very alarming signals, and we need to take them seriously, in a way that we take action, that we take a stance, so that we would prevent any uh, likelihood or any probability of committing suicide. With that being said, let me also highlight a very important misconception that I do think is really worth mentioning in this regard, and
Yeah,
that's
please.
people who die by committing suicide are people who are unwilling to seek help. And this is also another misconception, because sometimes it is because they cannot find help, but it does not necessarily mean that they will always be uh, rejecting the idea of seeking help. Rather, we need to approach them in the right way, of course, not by being judgmental or dismissive of the idea of committing suicide, rather to communicate with them first and foremost as human beings, that you understand them, that you appreciate and you recognize what they are going through, and that you feel sorry that they are going through such feelings, and that you will always be there for them, and that there must be a way out. There must be a right way of approaching the situation or the challenges that are confronting them. We will look more into this, but let me also here highlight another common uh, misconception in this regard, and that's talking about suicide may give, as a matter of fact, someone the idea, or as I mentioned before, this would implant the idea of committing suicide in their minds. And I do repeat, and I cannot stress enough this point, this is not how it works, because it will not harm if you just ask them, because it would be very alarming if they start to say or give indications yes they do, or they frankly and openly mention that yes they are actually thinking about taking their own lives. And this is a very important sign upon which we need to act, and act wisely, swiftly, and responsibly.
I understand. So, Imam Hassan, how can we educate ourselves? Like, this is an intro. How can we get to know more about this one? Please tell us.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we need, as a matter of fact, to find out more and to acquire the tools uh, of how to effectively and best deal with suicidal individuals, because it happens, and statistics in this regard are very clear, and this is why we need to be equipped and to provide this knowledge in order to raise awareness. And this, as a matter of fact, brings me to a very important issue, and that's what are the warning signs that someone is really considering committing suicide. It is very important in this regard to take seriously any suicidal talk or behavior. Don't be dismissive. Don't be judgmental. So we need to be aware that it is not just a warning sign that the person is thinking about suicide. Rather, as a matter of fact, it is also a cry for help. This is a person that's sending out an SOS message. This is why we need to be attentive and to be conscious about this.
Hmm.
Another very important point here in this regard is to be aware of the actual signs and what these signs include. We already mentioned another very important point, which is uh, seeking lethal means so that they can actually do take their own lives. So if we notice that they are seeking access to pills that usually they don't have to use or to administer, or they are requiring access to pistols or guns or even knives or any other object that can be used in committing suicide. We need to be attentive about this, especially with regards to our children. So we need to be careful. Why are they seeking such killing means? And as I mentioned, just by doing our necessary duty of eliminating access to such lethal means, we dramatically decrease and bring down the probability of committing suicide.
Hmm.
Another very important warning sign in this context is when we find the people that we care about or our children always talking about committing suicide and always talking about death, and when it is clear that they are always thinking and they seem to be preoccupied with death and ideas related to death and ending one's life. So this idea of finding them unprecedentedly thinking and talking about death and dying and violent means of dying. This is a very important warning sign that we need to be attentive uh, and be aware of. Another very important sign that we need to be uh, aware of is when we see that they are uh, frustrated, that they are not hopeful anymore. Rather, they are always in a state of hopelessness. This is a very important point. When they express such feelings of frustration that nothing will help, this seems to be the end of it. It is a dark tunnel with no light at the end. We need also to be attentive to such kind of language. Another uh, alarming signal is when we see uh, a language that reflects self loathing and
Hmm.
self hating. This is also very alarming when they exhibit this sense of low self esteem or worthlessness, and or always feeling guilty or a continuous state of feeling shameful.
Uh,
Any sign that's
maybe
related to
they're
this it shows that they don't like themselves, or they actually express the idea that they hate themselves, they look down upon themselves. This is very alarming, and we need to take action. Another very important point is when the person or when the individual is abusing drugs or any other substance, or they are abusing alcohol. This is a very warning sign that we need to be paying a close attention to. As I mentioned earlier, when they start saying goodbye to everyone as if they are leaving without a return, this is very alarming. Another point, when we see uh, a sense of withdrawal and isolation from their friends and their colleagues, this is also very alarming.
hmm,
Also, when we, in this regard, notice an unprecedented uh, manifestation of calmness, that this is no longer my child. Why is it all of a sudden now they are very calm? Excuse me, they are very calm. They don't seem to really be interested in what they are usually interested in. So this is also another very alarming sign. And once we see any of these signs or some of them, it is our duty to swiftly and responsibly take action by speaking out about this, by expressing that we love them, we care about them, but we have recently noticed how is it they seem to be not okay, and to provide the right atmosphere for them to reach out, for them to
Mhm.
open up, for them to feel comfortable, to speak up, to open up, and to share their fears and their concerns with us. The next point that I'd like to highlight here, and that's how can we, as parents, as teachers, as education specialists, and even as ordinary people in our communities, how can we, in practical terms, help the people that we love and the people that we care about?
Hmm.
Very important. First and foremost point is to speak up if you are worried, or if you feel that there is something that's alarming. It is very important to speak up, to approach the individual. So if you, as a parent, for instance, or as a teacher, you notice one or more of these warning signs of suicide in someone that you love, or in your child or your student, you may wonder, and you may uh, just start to scratch your head and think if it is a good idea or not to say something about this. And definitely, some people will be starting to doubt the idea itself,
Hmm.
whether they are right or wrong. So this is why talking to the individual directly and sharing what you feel, and even asking them directly and asking them what is wrong, definitely in a way that is considerate, in a way that's thoughtful, and in a way that respects them and maintains their honor and their dignity. This is very important, and we need, as a matter of fact, to even sometimes be direct and explicit in asking the question of whether or not they are thinking of committing suicide. And this is why, as a matter of fact, there are a number of ways to initiate a conversation about suicide. For example, you can initiate it by saying, I have been feeling concerned about you recently. Or, for instance, by saying that lately I have observed that some differences are there in how you deal with your friends and how you deal with your siblings. And
Hmm.
I'm wondering if I can help, or if there's anything that I can help you with. And this is the point, that everything can be said, but it's how you say it. And this is what we need to master
Exactly.
in this regard. And this is why also another way of opening up if we feel worried is to tell them, for instance, I needed to check in with you because you have not seen yourself recently. So, this idea of being genuinely interested in helping and showing that you really care. This is very important, and
Yeah.
this is why there are questions in this regard that we can ask. Like, for example, when did you begin feeling like this? If this, in order to encourage them to speak up and to share more with me. Another example is to ask them, uh, have you thought about reaching out for help? Or how can I best support you at this time? Or, for instance, how can I help you in this regard? Or what assistance do you need to deal with this situation? This brings me to another very important point, and that's uh, what is it we can say that actually helps the people that we care about. For instance, it is very important to be supportive by saying you are not alone in this, and I'm here for you. I will not uh, leave you alone in this. Uh, Another way or another uh, uh, way to express your concern and your support is by saying you may not believe it now, but the way you are feeling will definitely change. So giving them the hope that things will change and the situation will become better is very important. Furthermore, we can say to them, I may not be in a position now to fully comprehend how you feel, but I can assure you that I care about you and I am here to help you. This is also very helpful. In addition to this, we can say, for instance, when you want to give up, tell yourself that you will hold off for just one more day, hour, minute, whatever you can manage. So always reminding them that they need to persevere,
Hmm.
they need to be stronger. Is very important. Is very important in showing that you genuinely care, along with stressing that you are there for them and you will not leave them on their own. This is why, as we talk to a suicidal individual, it is very important to be yourself. You don't need to pretend or to fake uh, something that you are not uh, really are, or something that is not a part of you. So this is why it is
Can you explain
important.
more at this
Yeah,
point? I'm not quite
yeah.
sure that
What I
I.
mean by this is to let and to help the individual know that you care and that
Okay.
they are not alone. And it is very important to be genuine in this and to do your best to use the right language.
Hmm.
And also, it is important to show that you are really concerned, that you don't have, for example, if you are concerned, you don't need to hide this, but it is very important to show them this human feeling that you are really concerned. So this is also part of what I meant by the importance of be yourself. And this brings me to a very important point as we are talking with a suicidal individual. So, as I mentioned, it is very important to be yourself and to be an attentive and honest listener. It is very important to let the individual speak up and to unload their feelings, no matter how negative the conversation can appear. The fact that they are uh, talking and the fact that uh, such conversation is actually taking place is a very positive sign, and this is what we need to build on.
Hmm.
This brings me to the third point here, and
Hey.
that's the importance of uh, showing sympathy and not to be judgmental. I repeat, we need to avoid the attitude of being judgmental, because the suicidal individual is, as a matter of fact, doing the right thing by talking about their feelings. So we don't need to hurt them for sharing their feelings with us, for opening up with us. So this is why we need to avoid any attitude that would be deemed by them as judgmental. So no matter how difficult it may be to hear what they have to share with us, never ever show that you are judgmental, and always show that you are sympathetic, and that you are also empathizing with them, that you understand, that you can appreciate what they are going through, that you can relate to their feelings. And this is why you are always there for them. And this is the next point, and that's to present and to offer help and support. It is very important in this regard to reassure the individual that help is available, and that the people that care are there, and they will not leave them alone. So even as they are going through these suicidal feelings, all such feelings are only temporary.
Hmm.
So all of this, yes, it is difficult, it is tough, but it will definitely come to an end. And this is why it is very vital to provide the space for the individual to know that their life is important to you. And as you mentioned, that their life matters to everyone in their family, to everyone in their school, to everyone in the neighborhood, to everyone that knows them. This is very important. Another very important point, I know that it is very clear, but it is very important to emphasize it, and that's to be serious and to take the person seriously. Don't be disrespectful in any way. So if the suicidal person, for instance, expresses ideas like being so depressed, and that they cannot continue anymore, or that if they are having thoughts of taking their own lives, take them seriously. Don't be dismissive. Don't be sarcastic. So always be aware of this. This is why it is very important not to argue with the suicidal person, and also not to act like you are shocked and this is unbelievable. No, try to uh,
Accept them as he is.
comprehend, try to comprehend the whole situation and just deal with it. It is a reality, and you have to deal with it. Another very important point is not to necessarily promise them that you will not share this with anyone, because sometimes it is the only option to share what they said with people who can help. Like, for example, if it's a colleague or if it's your friend, it is very important in such a case to help them by telling their parents, because helping them and saving their lives is much more important than maintaining their confidentiality.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
at a
even in
situation
this
like
one,
this,
you can even
we may find no other option other than sharing what they have said. I mean, with regards to their attempt to commit suicide, with people that can really interfere in order to prevent any suicidal attempts, and promise them that we will do what is best for them. So this is very important to avoid uh, being sworn to secrecy. So it is very important to show them that you care, and you will do what is right for them. And this leads me to a very important point that also we need to avoid.
please.
Don't offer them ways to fix their
Yeah.
problem. It is not about just telling them no, you have to. forget about committing suicide and just to do this. This is not what they need to listen to at a situation like this. This is why, just as we mentioned, be there for them, be genuine, listen to them, and you can definitely give advice, but it is very important to give them the space that they are really cared about. They can feel that they really matter, and it is very important uh, to show them that it is not about how bad the problem is, rather, but how badly it is hurting uh, to lose them. So this is the point, that you will do all what it takes to help them and to support them. Also, a very important thing to avoid is blaming them. Don't use your fingers in order to start accusing them and start to blaming them. You need to avoid something like this. And this brings me to another very important practical piece of advice, and that's to respond quickly in a situation of crisis. So this is very important.
In a situation of crisis, can you explain that?
So what I mean by this is to be swift in how we deal with a suicidal situation. So if a friend or a family member tells us that he or she is actually considering committing suicide or taking their own lives, so it
Okay,
is very important in a situation like this to evaluate the immediate
sure, sure.
danger the person is in. This is
The
actually the
support
point.
that
The
he
point
gives to
is
them.
to have and to buy the time in order to prevent them and to seek help. And this is what I actually mean by the importance of being swift in how we respond to a situation of crisis. So this is
Yeah,
why it's also important to be aware of the fact that the individuals who are at the highest risk for taking their own lives in the near future, they actually do have specific suicide plans, and the means to actually take their own lives, and also they have a time set for doing it, and they have a clear intention to do it. So this is why, if you see signs that shows all of this, like for example, they have written notes or they have a written letter. So this is why we need to be quick, not to try to dismiss and be dismissive of the probability that they may be actually on the way of committing suicide. So this is why the following questions can help us in conducting an assessment of the immediate risk of committing suicide. So, for example, you can ask them about their planning. So, for instance, by saying, do you have a suicide plan? Another very important question is regarding the means or the tools. Do you have what you need to carry out your plan, such as pills, pistols, guns, etc.? Also about the time framework. Do you know when you would do it? Another thing is about their intention. Do you intend to take your own life or commit suicide? This is very important. And this is why it's very important in this regard as well. And it's very significant to be aware of the levels of suicide risk. Is it a low level? Is it moderate? Is it high? Is it severe? Low by some suicidal thoughts. And there is no, so I mean, they are merely thoughts. And there is actually no suicide plan. Or when
they
he or
just
she,
think of it.
exactly. So this is just a low level. It can be a moderate level if the thoughts are there. They have a plan, but it is a vague one and it is not very lethal. Or when they say that. they may or may not attempt suicide. So this is a moderate level. We also have a high level, and that's when we see that they have suicidal thoughts being there, in addition to having specific plans that are highly lethal. And when they say that, yeah, it is very probable that they would commit suicide, also it can be severe, and that's when they express such suicidal thoughts, and they have very clear and to the point plan of committing suicide. And when they say that, yes, they will attempt to commit suicide, so this is a very severe level. So
Yeah,
this is why if a suicide attempt seems imminent, we need to reach out for the concerned authorities and the right people who are responsible by calling 911, for instance, in the States, or the similar hotlines in whatever part of the world, and to contact the local authorities, or to actually take the person to an emergency room, and to make sure that you remove from their reach any drugs, knives, guns, or anything that would be used as lethal objects or tools in committing suicide. So also it is very important to not and to don't, under any circumstances, leave the suicidal person alone. Don't leave them on their own. If the risk is very high, don't leave them alone, because chances are they would commit suicide, and they are very high. So don't leave them alone if you find the situation to be as this. Another very important practical tip and piece of advice in this regard is to provide help and to offer support. And all what it takes is just the courage to be there for them, and try to think through practical ways of how you can support them. So, for instance, we can get professional help. Also, be there for them to follow up on treatment, not just to leave them and that's it. To be always proactive in helping them and showing that you are always there for them, and by telling them that they can call you if you need them, and if they need you. So always to establish this line of communication. Also, it is very important to encourage positive changes in their lifestyle. Another very important point is to make a safety plan by helping them develop a set of practical steps that they would promise to implement them. Another very important point is to remove the potential means of committing suicide. As we mentioned, not to make available for them or within their reach any tools that can be used in killing themselves. Another very important point is to continue our support over the long time. So all of these are very important practical steps to help them in preventing committing suicide.
thank you, Imam Hussein, for this wonderful
Thank you so much. And also, I think
discussion.
it would be worthwhile to conclude by reminding everyone of the noble Quranic verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ أَحْيَاهَا فَكَأَنَّمَا أَحْيَا النَّاسَ جَمِيعًا, and that's whoever saves one single human life, it is as if they have saved the entire humanity.